Being happy, engaged, and productive is not only about doing what you love, but also being the person who you love in yourself. Welcome to the 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. Here you learn about leading authentically. You'll hear stories from leaders about leading authentically at home, work, and community, and how that led them to a fulfilling and prosperous life. Welcome to 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. Today we have Dr. David Altman. He's the Executive Director of Center for Creative Leadership. We have an interesting topic today, which is the polarity of focusing on people and the organization and task. David, how are you today?
It's a pleasure to be with you, Zahi. And that's such a great topic to be talking about in today's world of leadership and organizational life.
Absolutely. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I've had sort of two big parts of my career. The first part, I was a public health professor at a couple of medical schools in the US. And then I took a leap of faith and joined the globally renowned Center for Creative Leadership. And that was about 20 years ago. And I've had 5 different executive team positions at the Center for Creative Leadership. Who knows what will happen in the future?
Absolutely. So I know you have a global experience. You worked in Europe, you worked in the Middle East, and now you're in the US. And I'm pretty sure you had a lot of demanding tensions, I would say, polarities throughout your career as a leader. So let's talk about the polarity of balancing between people and organization. What do you think? Where should we focus on as leaders?
There's a long history on that topic and a lot of research. Going back to like Kurt Lewin, one of the most renowned social scientists, talked about the relationship between task or polarity, task and relationship. So, of course, if you focus on task, that's around setting goals and planning and organizing and managing resources. And, the research shows that when you focus on that, you have higher productivity, you have a lot of efficiency. And the risk, however, if you overdo that, if you neglect the people side, then you got problems with job satisfaction, engagement, et cetera. So focusing on the work, on tasks is important, but not to the neglect of relationships to the people side. So when you focus on relationships, that's around supporting team members, fostering a really great work environment, team cohesion, emotional intelligence. And what the research shows is that people have really high levels of job satisfaction, high motivation. They love working there. The teams are together, and that's great. But if you overdo that and you don't pay attention to the task, wow, we love working here. I regret to inform you that we're going out of business because we're not getting anything done. So I'm overstating it. So it's a both and rather than an either or. So yes, leaders today, given all the change that's going on and the tensions and the divisions, et cetera, and uncertain economy, leaders need to focus on the needs of people and they need to focus on getting work done. And so a lot of what we do at CCL, it's around that intersection. So the key point here, it's a both and, not an either or. Yes, focus on tasks and focus on relationships.
During the industrial revolution and afterwards, I remember that micromanagement was the key. Just grabbing that stopwatch, making sure that all the production line is on time and they're producing numbers. Nowadays, we have shifted. We're focusing a lot on people. They're healthy physically, mentally, and we have shifted to focusing more on people. I know it's balancing both is easier said than done. What are some of your recommendations for those leaders who are challenged by it? And also, does it change from early leadership all the way up for senior leaders and senior managers?
Maybe we can just take a step back and say, like, what do human beings need? Because if we feed those needs, then good things will happen to them as human beings outside of work and human beings at work. And so there's a lot of different ways to look at that, but human beings generally, they want to be part of something larger than themselves. This is like, they want to have a purpose. They want to contribute to the world in meaningful ways. They want to be paid attention to. Humans want to be listened to be respected, to be loved, to matter. So if you take those dimensions, something larger, be paid attention to, listened to, respected, loved, and mattering. So how does that play out in the workplace? Well, love in the workplace is not like love of a family member or of a friend, but you can still engage in those. So when you think about, well, I'm a leader and I've got my key performance indicators, my KPIs, and I'm being held accountable, and we have things to do, et cetera. Well, how do you bring these two things together? Well, how about a unified vision and purpose? If people want to be part of something larger, as individuals, so do organizations. I mean, we know that organizations that have a compelling vision, that have values that people resonate with, that have a purpose that is deeply meaningful to individuals, then the organization benefits and individuals benefit if you can target that intersection between the organization and the person. Let's look at being paid attention to. You know the human side of it because I just talked to you about that. But organizations that don't include the diversity of the people that they have, and diversity is broadly defined, their lived experience, demographic factors, language, culture, work skills, personality, then people aren't going to be paid attention to. They're going to feel excluded. And when people feel excluded, not included, when their voices aren't heard, the organization suffers. And what about listening? Well, organizations that don't listen to their customers, to their stakeholders, to their shareholders, to what's happening in the world, they will fail. And likewise, if organizations don't listen to their employees and their contractors, they're also going to fail. So I could go on, but the basic point is, look, let's focus on some of the deeper needs that humans have, see if we can align them, which is not difficult to do, with the needs of organizations. And the sweet spot is reducing the perception that, well, there's an organization with needs and there's individual with needs, and it's really hard to bring these together. So let's just work our people and pay them a lot of money and they'll do the work. No, bring this together. Organization and personal are more aligned than perhaps we sometimes think they are.
Nice. So going back to my second question, which was, does it change as I move up in the hierarchy in an organization?
I would say yes and no. And let me talk about the no. So I have the privilege at the Center for Creative Leadership of teaching or facilitating in our Leadership at the Peak program, which is for the C-suite. So C-level corporate leaders, heads of NGOs, university presidents and provosts, et cetera. And they all come to that program wanting to be better business leaders, better organizational leaders. And they come out of that program realizing that's not their issue. Their issue is they need to be better human beings. And the goals that they set are around paying more attention to their families, spending more time giving back to the communities in which they live or in which they identify with, bringing kindness and humanity to their business acumen. So the fact is, and we go back to basic human needs, even these icons of leadership, I mean, the people that come to Leadership at the Peak, these are the people you see on TV and you read about in the news. And at the end of the day, they're talking about being better human beings. Again, that's not why they signed up for the program. But when you create the space for them to engage in that reflection and to be with each other in community, that's what comes out. Now, when you're more junior in your career, you're aspiring to gain skills and move up the ladder, et cetera, but you still want meaningful work. You still want purpose. You still want to give back. You want to work with great colleagues, but you don't have the benefit of looking back from the top of the mountain. As someone once told me, I've been to the top of the mountain and there's nothing there. Well, what's there still is humanity and humaneness and meaning. And that's what everybody wants, wherever you are in an organization.
So it is a polarity, and a lot of us as human beings, we have our own personalities. And let's think about as a continuum. Let's say one end is my focus on task, and maybe I have a personality that's I'm an achiever, getting things done, and that's my focus. And there are a lot of people who are more of feelers, more emotionally intelligent, relationship focused. Let's say I'm leaning towards one side as the leader. How can I stretch myself and open myself to look at the other side?
It's difficult. And I'm going to paraphrase the quote, but F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was a American author, said something to the effect: the test of first rate intelligence is to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And I think that's the essence of this tension or polarity. It's sometimes called wicked problems. And, we teach this a lot, as you know, Zahi, at the Center for Creative Leadership. What seems like a problem to solve, what seems like, hey, here's an issue we're facing, there's a solution. Let me go after the solution. We got to get some work done here. We need to make more money, make more impact. Let's focus our attention on getting stuff done. Let's have better processes. Let's have a better IT system. Yes. And humans make up the DNA of the organization. So if you overdo the task to the neglect of or the expense of the relationship, you're not going to get as much done. And so, there's all kinds of these polarities that we face. And we're dealing with this at CCL right now. We've just done a big reorganization, and a current polarity is global local. So do we want to be global? Yes, we do. To the expense of local context and mores and culture. And, oh, no, we got to pay attention to local and all the contextual changes in language and culture and different ways of operating. But if we overdo that, how can we be a global organization and leverage the full capability of CCL? What about centralized, decentralized? Should we be centralized? Hey, there's advantages to being centralized. But if you overdo that, there are disadvantages. Oh, okay, so let's be decentralized. Oh, decentralized is really good. Yeah, empower people. But if you neglect centralization benefits, then you're going to drop into the downside of being decentralized. Should we reduce cost and price, or should we retain our quality? Yes, lower costs and retain quality. It goes on and on. Should we focus? This is another one at CCL. Should we focus on the business of today, or should we focus on building a robust business for the future? It's not or. If we don't pay attention to the business of today, there will be no future. If we focus only on the future and doing cool things and doing AI but not pay attention to the business of today, there also won't be a future. So we need both.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. This episode is sponsored by 360 Degrees Consulting, Inc. For information about our training, coaching, or consultancy services, please email us at info@consulting360d.com.
So, how can we be conscious about this? I'm a leader. I'm faced with a polarity. We started this conversation about task relationship. How can I be more aware, more conscious about what's going on around me in order to make the right decisions?
If there were an easy answer to that, we'd probably both win the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, but there isn't. So one thing that has been intriguing me for a couple of years is around our brain, how we perceive the world. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm not an expert on that. But I do know that there have been about 190 cognitive biases that are documented scientifically. And we have these cognitive biases because the world is complex. There's so much incoming information that in order for us to operate, to live, to function, we've got to simplify, we got to categorize, we got to generalize, we got to take bits of information and act on it. So one of the challenges that we have, one of these biases, and there's, as I said, 190, is the status quo bias. We human beings are more inclined to cling to the status quo, to cling to how we currently operate, than to embrace uncertainty. Because most people would rather have predictability, even though it's not great. I don't work for the best team or the best organization, but I know how to function within that. And doing something completely different, that scares me. I don't know what the outcomes are going to be. We need to be aware of biases that we have that affect how we interact with other people, and we affect how we see the world, and we need to understand and accept that the world and organizations require us to change. If we don't change commensurate or consistent with how the world is changing, we're going to fall behind as individuals or organizations. So we need to challenge ourselves to be open-minded, to have curiosity, to have a growth mindset where you believe your potential is unknown and unknowable, where you embrace challenge and learning because you know that if you do that, you're going to be more effective. That's one approach that I would offer up.
So we talk a lot about authenticity here at this podcast. When we are authentic, we really know who we are as human beings, what our purpose is. That's the driving force of our leadership style. The real world, we live in a dynamic world. It doesn't always happen that easily that we can be ourselves, we can behave from our perspective of the world. How can we be more authentic, and how can looking at polarities, managing both, help us with our authenticity, help us in becoming better leaders?
Yeah, I think many people can see through people who are being inauthentic. Not all the time. Some people can really fake you out. The courageous thing to do is to come to terms with who you are and to continually ask yourself the question, like, what do I stand for? And part of that is like, what are my core values? And, we do work at CCO with that too. And you can't have 30 core values. Like, what are the 5 or 6 or 8 that really matter to you? That when you are in a position where you are faced with a difficult decision, that you have a foundation to go back to. And, it can be instrumental, it could be religious, it could be spiritual, it could be humanistic, whatever it is, but go back to those. And I've had a couple of instances in the last couple of months, just difficult situations involving people in work situations and in personal situations where in the moment I wasn't sure how to react. And I was able to pivot quickly to, well, what do I stand for? Like at the end of the day, what is it that really matters to me? And what is it that I want to be known for by myself, let alone other people? And when I do that, it becomes easier to be courageous, to be vulnerable, to put myself out there, even to show some uncertainty and weakness, because that's who I am. And people then believe it. And, often the loudest, most confident people who dominate conversation, I'm not listening to them because that's not real. Or if that's who they really are, that's not who I want to deal with. So my point is, go back to the fundamentals. Go back to what you truly stand for. And one of the things that guides me is all religions have some form of the golden rule, and it's around how you treat other people. What's hateful to me, don't do to other people. What I don't like, don't do to other people. And on top of that, there may be things that I don't like that other people like, or there may be things that they don't like that I do like. So while it's okay to take that self-centered, what's hateful to me, don't do to other people, and be empathetic and curious about other people and bridge the boundaries, bridge our different identities. And if we have a moment, I'll give you, I'm writing about this right now, but so my wife and I took a vacation in Europe recently, which we used to live in Europe, so we like to go back. I'll admit here, little vulnerability, I'm a Taylor Swift fan. So we went to Warsaw, Poland. We saw Taylor Swift with 65,000 of our best friends. So the blog that I'm writing with a colleague is around not Taylor Swift, who is quite a leader, but the Swiftie movement. And the Swiftie movement bridges identity groups like nothing I've ever seen. Maybe the Olympics, maybe way, way back Woodstock. And there are other examples that I'm unaware of. But it was unbelievable how people from all around the world, speaking different languages, different ages, different, I'm sure, political views, we didn't talk about politics, came together, and the kindness and love and caring and support, people helping each other, giving friendship bracelets. It was unbelievable. And it just led me to come to understand again, in a polarized world, we human beings, we can come together. We can do amazing things across what we perceive to be barriers. But it takes courage and vulnerability. It takes us tapping into deeply rooted values that we have, which are more similar than dissimilar. And so in a broken world that we live in, for me, the metaphor of the Swifties is a reminder to be a little more positive and to figure out ways in our workplaces, our communities that we live in, and in the world in which, you and I, Zahi, have the privilege of working with leaders across the globe. How can we get them to understand that these seeming polarities, these seeming divisions, that they can be connected? We can span boundaries, but it doesn't happen automatically. It happens with courage and tears and effort and emotion. And we got to tap into the human spirit. If we do that, we will leave for our children and grandchildren a better world.
Thank you so much, David. My last question is, how can people find you on social media? And if I want to learn more about polarities, polarity thinking, polarity management, what should I do? Where do I go from here as a leader?
So on the first one, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can reach me there with my name. And you can reach me by email, Altman D, my last name, first initial, first name at ccl.org. On polarity, if you Google Polarity Associates, this is the organization that we have learned a lot from. So there's some good material. And if you use artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, and you just type in, AI knows all about polarity. So if you're struggling with a polarity, a tension, go into AI and say, hey, are you aware of polarity management? They will say yes. What can you tell me about the polarity of quality versus speed, or centralized versus decentralized? And it will give you more material than you can deal with. And then you could, if you're willing, you could put in some particulars about the situation that you're in at work or at home and have AI give you even more. So now that we're in the AI world, we're both in the appreciative inquiry AI world and the artificial intelligence world, or the Altman Insights world AI. There's good technology to help us all.
Thank you so much, David. I know there's a lot more to polarity thinking, polarity management. I know we do at CCL, we do polarity mapping techniques and so forth for our clients. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been great to have you, and hopefully we'll catch up offline sometime soon.
Thank you for listening to our 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. If you like our podcast, please make sure to follow our channel. Also, please like and share our episodes on social media.